I mean, you might get lucky with one thing, you might get lucky with another thing, but your growth and your healthy pipeline and success is going to come from doing multiple things in line with who your audience are.
Funnel Visionaries.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Funnel Visionaries, where we talk a whole lot of realness about perfecting the customer journey. I'm your host, Konrad Sanders, and today I'm joined by my pal, Dan Archer, who's one of the managing partners at Cactus, and he's also an agency growth marketing expert. And in today's episode, we delve into why Dan has beef with the traditional marketing funnel, but more importantly, we look at the power of touchpoint marketing. So let's dive in. Mr. Dan Archer, hello, welcome to Funnel Visionaries. Hello. How are you doing today?
I'm all right, buddy. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining. Are you ready to dive in deep into the wonderful world of B2B marketing?
I'm ready to swim in the pools of B2B marketing.
Yeah, I love it. Nice little metaphor to kick things off. You know what? It might sound like I'm being facetious there, but I do genuinely bloody love B2B marketing. Like it gets me up in the morning. I'm sure you probably feel the same.
Yeah, I do. I think it has this bit of a stigma around B2B. It's a little bit boring, B2B, and it's businesses, and it's not very interesting. I actually think it's more interesting than other styles of marketing. I actually prefer it to maybe to more consumer marketing when I think acquisition's a little bit colder, a little bit quicker. I like B2B. I like the basis of it. You know, we talk about B2B is built on trust and chemistry, and what we do is actually relationship marketing. That's the foundations of B2B. And as quite an emotive person and quite a human to human person, which is why I much prefer building those relationships with people and nurture them over time. That works for me. So yeah, for me, it's great. I absolutely love it.
And you mentioned human to human there. I was going to say, you know, H2H, somewhat maybe overused cliche, but that's the reality, isn't it? We're selling humans to humans. And I think in the B2B world, another reason why I love it is because there's the fact that it's often quite boring just leaves a lot of opportunity on the table for people like us to be creative and to focus on relationships and humans and do things in the right way.
Yeah, when you're thinking about acquisition in B2B, and it's proven, and we all know this, it's based on touch points, it's based on longer sales cycles. And so over a period of time, you've got to be creative, because you've got to understand people, you've got to come up with different touch points which are relevant to your target audience, stuff which is going to interest them, stuff which is going to get you noticed. It's probably not going to happen at the first, second, or even third connection that you make or the touch point you have. It's probably going to be around, you know, the fifth, sixth, and just be, knowing that and being able to be a little bit more creative and dynamic with what you do, depending on who your audience is. That's really interesting. I think there's a huge opportunity there. And if we speak about agencies, every agency has a different style, what works for them, what they do. I call it the marketing fingerprint. It's all the different nuances inside an agency. And when you get all those things working together, that's what defines you, and that makes you, and that's how you can differentiate yourself. That's how you're different to different agencies, and you don't then need to replicate what others are doing. There isn't kind of one blueprint that fits all. So I find that really exciting, really creative, and a lot of fun to have. So yeah, big flag waver for B.
And hopefully our listeners feel the same way. Otherwise, they're listening to the wrong podcast.
Yeah, you're listening to the wrong one. Go away. No, don't come back. Stay here.
Exactly. No, please. Give me likes. Give me attention. You mentioned a couple of things there. Fingerprints and touch points. I love that they're obviously connected there in terms of the metaphor. I want to dive into that concept and that sort of approach to marketing. But before I do, there's a little segment a little bit of marketing silliness that we like to call Genie in a Bottle. Genie in a bottle, right? So I am going to turn magically into your genie for the day. I'm going to grant you one wish, okay?
Oh, okay.
It must be about marketing, right? So if you could change anything about the world of marketing, anything at all, it might be about marketers, it might be about approaches, it could be about just the industry in general. What would that wish be? What would you change? This is your one opportunity to do so.
Okay. I think it would be to change the perception that in B2B marketing, there's a thing of quick wins. I spoke about it before at the Agencynomics event and in my growth survey around the silver bullet. it would be to change the perception that there is a silver bullet, there is things you can do quickly, because there isn't. There is a myth, and a lot of agencies and a lot of B2B businesses go wrong by assuming there's just one thing they can do, which is going to trigger an avalanche of leads and inbound inquiries coming into their business. And there isn't. I think it's that thinking almost pollutes the way people approach marketing, and not just for themselves, but others might have that perception too, and they hear it talk about, and they kind of a wish others have. And then they start to think, well, there must be something I can do, just that one thing. I was going to find that one thing. What's that one silver bullet? And it doesn't exist. So yeah, if I could wish for anything this Christmas, it would be to lose that perception, and for everyone to know that it takes time. It takes trusting chemistry, takes multiple touch points. It based on knowing your audience, knowing what interests them, what's relevant to them, and putting things in place to systematically and methodically create touch point with them over a period of time. Not just trying to do kind of one thing that comes in.
It's such a great point, and it resonates, and it's kind of an important reminder for myself even, as I mentioned previously, I know logically that there is no one silver bullet, and it's something I kind of preach to our team and our marketing director often. But then I will occasionally be guilty of falling into that trap of overhearing, these sort of lead gen people and agencies going, oh, I can get you 10 leads a week following this recipe, this formula. And, I'll get sucked into a funnel and want to fork out for an expensive course. And then my team are dragging me back going, no, it's a scam in a sense. And it's an important reminder, because especially when the economy is tough, there are market pressures there. Naturally, all you want to do is find a recipe and kind of drive those leads. But it's even harder in that moment, because all of these kind of supposed silver bullets, these quick wins, often outbound spamming, LinkedIn and the world is rife with it at that time. Like now, for example, there's more of it because everyone's just desperately trying to grasp those leads. When the reality is, it's probably the best time now to be focusing more on relationship building, on softer selling, because if there's no budgets, you can't squeeze money out of someone. They'll be more adverse to your efforts in a way.
Yeah, I think so. I think just, I understand why people will think like that, and understand why people will want to have that silver bullet, have that kind of one thing they can do. I get it totally. And especially when agency pipelines are squeezed and they're paralyzed by perhaps a slow economy, decision paralysis on deals that maybe you've got in there. I understand, they're going to be looking for that one thing to get it. I really do understand it, but the industry, it just doesn't work like that. There's very few things that kind of work like that. But, being a little bit more patient, putting touch points in place, knowing who your audience are, and appealing to them, not just on a title basis, as in, marketing director at this size company or whatever, but understand them a little bit more behaviorally and what motivates them and what kind of things are they interested in. What does success look like for them? What kind of things might scare them? How risk averse are they? All these different things, they can make you really, really relevant. And that almost could be your silver bullet. That could be an approach you take where you go, we're going to have a really deep understanding of who our target audience is. We're going to create touch points which are really valid with them and really relevant to them, really resonate with them. And that's our silver bullet. Our silver bullet is knowing our audience inside and out and appealing to them massively. I don't know. Yeah. That's maybe an approach someone could take.
I think we sort of preach the same thing often. And as an agency, a big part of what we do is that research piece, like understanding buyers. A lot of companies come to us because they want copy, they want words, they want messaging, they want content. Mm-hmm. And that's where I'm having many conversations where I bring up our TCC ecosystem and go, okay, is there a strategy in place? And has that strategy been informed by deep buyer insight? And I think that's almost like a step that's often skipped. While it might not necessarily be a silver bullet in and of itself, I think it's an ingredient that's needed to really find all the bronze bullets, right? All the things that are more likely to work for you. Because if you understand your audience, you can create copy that resonates, you can create content that resonates, you can do a lot more rather than just trying to spam them.
Yeah, you can just be more appealing. And my talk at Agencynomics back in September, and I know, Konrad, you're on the panel there. my talk was titled "There's no silver bullet," and hopefully I went on to kind of give my opinion and based on data and insight on why there's no bullet. And actually, my end slide was, you don't just need a silver bullet, you need an entire magazine of them, because that's what you actually need. It's multiple things layered on top of each other. No one thing necessarily has the overall impact. I mean, you might get lucky with one thing, you might get lucky with another thing, but your growth and your healthy pipeline and success is going to come from doing multiple things in line with who your audience are, what they like, what their pains and challenges are, what keeps them up at night. And you position yourself as really relevant, really understanding across all the touch points you mentioned. That's what's making the difference. And that's so there is no silver bullet. It's a silver magazine is what you need of lots of different touch points. Yeah.
Let's strip things back to kind of basics for a moment. For anyone that's, let's say, new to B2B marketing or marketing, how would you define a touch point? Because we've talked about touch points a lot. I'm assuming you're not talking about prodding people on the shoulder and
don't go around
face.
prodding. Yeah, don't go around prodding prospects. That's probably not going to do you too well. So I would define a touch point is an instance where a prospect has an interaction with your agency or your business. It's an interaction with them. It can be as subtle as they receive one of your emails and they read it. It might be as subtle as you talk to them at an event where you meet them. They read some content. It might even be they see a LinkedIn post you've done. But touch points can be big. They can be small. They can be grand, where they come to an intimate, dinner with you or a round table or some sort of event where you actually spend a bit of time with them. That's quite significant. Or it could be as passive as they're just connected with you on LinkedIn and they just see your posts, coming through. And just for that, fleeting 5 seconds, they're thinking about you. They've read your post and what you're saying is kind of in their language and it's sympathetic towards their pains and challenges. And, just for that moment, they're going, yeah, that makes sense to me. They might take a little bit of that away with them. Not that you'll ever know. They'll take a bit of that away with them. They might mention that in a meeting they have later. So they can be big and small, but the sum of all touch points is what adds up to a prospect experience. And that's what someone thinks of you. That's proposition 101, what they recall when they think about you, that space you occupy in the front of their mind when they think about you. And that's what you're trying to do with touch points. You're trying to create a perception inside someone's mind around what you think, what you say, how aligned you are. It's the thoughts and feelings they have when maybe they think of you, and to keep you top of mind, because there's a lot of distractions out there. There's a lot of agencies out there. It's a very saturated market. So it's really hard to differentiate and stand out in front of audiences. And so that's where you've kind of got to be, really understanding who your audience are, so you can be the ones who are most relevant to them and not being one of those who are kind of maybe being a little bit broader targeting, broader message, nothing specific, which is then a little bit more passively engaged with, if at all. A touch point isn't someone just flicks through and scans past it because it's not an impact, because you can have negative touch points as well, where actually you say something maybe controversial, something that's a little bit, wrong or counter, and you've made some assumption maybe you've got slightly wrong. That can have a negative effect. So we have to be careful with negative touch points as well as positive touch points as well when we're trying to build that prospect experience for our agencies.
It's interesting. I'm writing notes here because a variety of questions keep popping into my head. I'm like, which direction should I go in? You mentioned kind of broad versus specific and also LinkedIn, and not to make this all about LinkedIn, this episode, but it's interesting because social in general, I think, is designed in a way whereby sort of generic and broader is more likely to get virality, right? It's more likely to get the vanity metrics, which you and I know is actually quite an important thing to try to avoid, because you can easily get sucked into that dopamine hit of, more likes. And as we see on LinkedIn, as an example, just someone crying about something that happened in their personal life, that's because of the emotion there and the fact it's tapping into the primal brain of people who are mindlessly scrolling. So they're more likely to go, that's interesting from a personal perspective. The reality is it could be hindering your success in terms of really being specific, like you said, and tuning into the actual pains, needs, desires of your audience, especially in terms of actually trying to link that back to what you're trying to do, which is really sell your services in the end of the day through a kind of softer, more value-driven approach.
I did your point there you make around vanity metrics. It's a phrase I use quite a lot in my own, vanity metrics versus gravity metrics, which is, the vanity metrics are the stuff which looks nice on paper, but it's pretty meaningless. It's not directly attributable back to what you're doing, versus the gravity metrics are grounded in reality. And they're the things which actually, make the difference day to day in your agency. And, it's really important when we're creating, especially content strategies, which is probably where it mostly comes out around, how it's used on social and how content's consumed, is making sure that, we stay away from the stuff which is too high level, and, we don't fall into the trap of going, well, we know the kind of the emotional oversharing kind of stuff, which, does work on LinkedIn. We probably know that. For example, you take LinkedIn as a platform, we know that the outpourings of vulnerability, the ones which kind of get the most interaction and likes, but, what's that doing for your business? And are you really being able to build a perception around your business? Like, I'd certainly argue there is a place for those types of posts, but also just making sure that, what you're doing is if you're trying to engage with a particular prospect audience, is that you're speaking their language, that you're being sympathetic to the pains and challenges they've got. Like, yes, you're showing your human side and stuff. That's absolutely fine. And there's a place for that, and a certain percentage of posts can absolutely be that. But you've got to make sure the other ones are just really aligned with what's keeping your target prospects up at night, being sympathetic to what's going on in their lives, the challenges they're facing under a business. They might seem on a surface level to have this problem inside a business. It might be something that's documented in the press. It might be something that you've known about, they've shared about in a chairman's report or something like that. But then being able to appreciate maybe the nuances around, okay, well, what other considerations are affecting that? Because if it was just simply solving that problem, it'd be very, very easy. Most problems are easy to form a solution towards, but you have to then unpick and try and have an appreciation for, well, what else is going on that is underpinning that problem, which make it more complex to solve. Then that's where you can really start to be relevant, is when you start to demonstrate an appreciation, not just for the surface level problems, but maybe some of the pains and challenges that are underneath as well. Sprinkling a little bit mix of personality and vulnerability and that human to human emotion. I think you've got a pretty good recipe there for, coming across in the right way. Authoritative, but also human and nice.
Yeah. I think like the concept of a mix and a recipe, that again, these are things I say often. Our 13 lenses I kind of equate
I love that.
Different ingredients. And again, when it comes to, let's say social media content mix, I think that's important. Like, as you said, there is a place for the more personal posts that might be conducive to sort of a bit more virality, right? Because that's sharing your personalities. Just go all, maybe I think there is a place in social for both, but it's just about getting that weighting right and not getting sucked into the sort of vanity pit.
It's the balance. You're absolutely right. It's a balance of having a little bit of sprinkling of all these different things is what makes you or your agency or your brand authentic and genuine. It's not being weighted in one direction or being too in the, some agencies and businesses can be too much on the business side and they come across as quite corporate and quite cold.
Yeah.
Others can be too much on the vulnerability and personal side, and there's not enough substance to go, okay, well, I like you as a person, but there's not, I don't see much or understand your service offering, your perspective on things, your appreciation for what challenges a particular sector or industry might be facing.
Yeah. There's definitely people that I can think of that fall into both brackets there. Bringing it back to Touchpoints, and you mentioned that some of them will really just be kind of a fleeting moment of someone paying attention to your post or piece of content. Sometimes they might not even be paying attention, but they just still get like a whiff of you, your brand, your personal brand, your agency's brand. So with that in mind, would you say that it's more that volume is really important? That kind of, I guess it's the quantity versus quality question. Ideally, we'd have both, but we've got limited resources, budget, time and attention span. So like, would you say it would be better for an agency, a B2B company to focus more on volume in terms of content and therefore potential touch points, or focus on a few and do them really, really well?
Yeah. So the temptation is to do a lot of things and to go, well, it stands to reason, logical reason. If I do a lot of stuff and I have a lot of stuff out there, then I'm going to catch more, right? That makes sense. More equals more. It must do. I don't think that always works like that. And it's not always the case. And it's certainly not efficient for agencies to do that who operate on limited resources, limited budgets, tight margins, the resource they have internally available to do all this stuff. Like I bet every agency who's listening to this is probably going, I wish I could do more. I just don't have the capacity. I don't have the resource and time, and I don't have the financial, I don't have the budget available to do it, but I'd love to do more. And I guess my view on that is you don't need to do more. You just need to do fewer things, but do them better. And what I mean by that is do fewer things which are more aligned with what your agency is good at. So your skill sets, the areas you're passionate about. Don't try and bring in touch points and tactics which you're not passionate about or you're not skill set in, because you won't get them done. Like if you don't like speaking on a podcast, for example, don't go out and build a content strategy around a podcast, because you're going to dread it every time you have to come and record it and do it. You're going to cringe at it. You're going to, it's just not for me. So don't force yourself. Whereas if actually your skill is more in digital marketing, great, go away and have some fun with your SEO and your PPC and your paid spend. Go and have some fun with it. Be creative with it. See how you can target, see how you can do keyword hijacking. You can do lots of different things around it. So I think it's more around understanding what touch points or what tactics you're good at, what works for your agency. So a good exercise to do is to go away and do a bit of a prospect experience map and understand what were all my successful deals that came through, not just what was the source of them. I talk about this in the agency growth survey, not just what was the source of them, but what touch points along the way led to that client, that prospect becoming a client. And when you do that for one, you'll go, okay, yeah, they had these touch points along the way. These are all the interactions. It's not always a perfect science. It's not always able to do that, but you can probably map and figure out what touch points occurred. Now, one or two isn't going to be particularly useful. But you can do that with your last 10 wins. You're going to start to see patterns within the touch points. So was there any commonalities within those journeys where you were most effective? Did 8 out of 10 of those successful conversions, did they all included the same thing? We met them face to face. They read a piece of our content and they all received our email. So that would stand to reason to say when they meet you as a person, they're obviously building that trusting chemistry and they like you as a person. So building in an element of physicality is going to be really important. They also like your content, what you're talking about, because they've all had a touch point with a piece of content, and your email's obviously working in a certain way. They've obviously, they've read it, they've engaged with it somehow. It's probably written in the right style. Your tone of voice is right. So I would say let's focus then building maybe a smaller touch point plan around those key things that are working. Things you're really comfortable. I'm a really good writer. I really like meeting people. I'm quite human like that. So we'll build into our prospect journey and we'll build our marketing plan around prospecting people, finding a reason to be present in front of them, whether that's through our events or networking, whether that's one-to-one invitations to meet for coffee or whatever it might be. We'll focus on some content and thought leadership, and then we'll have another regular touch point like an email or something like that. Suddenly you've got a smaller touch point plan that's more considered, but crucially it's based on the insight of where you've been successful before. So what you've then created is taken the strongest parts of what you've had before and you've built a plan around them. That is it's a fairly long answer, but that's probably how I'd be approaching that.
Long, but very, very practical, which is what we want, right? Because so much of marketing and marketing advice can be kind of fluffy, and or you can go. The takeaway can be, okay, that was cool, that was interesting. Well, I need to do lots of stuff, right? How do I in actuality sit down and map this out and plan it out? But you're given a very kind of tangible, practical way to do it. Look at your last 10 wins, and it could even be look at your your gold clients. If you're going after those, look at the revenue drivers and the companies that you want to work with, and sort of analyze what were those touch points. I think it comes back to something we mentioned before, which is buyer insight, and something that we do, as I said, for our clients is we run buyer interviews to gather, research and insights and data for them to feed into everything we do. And then we realized a couple of years ago, much like many people and agencies, that we were a case of a plumber with leaky pipes. We're like, we haven't done our own buyer interviews with our own clients, and then we sort of ran a series. And I think that's where you can get into the weeds of sort of understanding more about their journey, because sometimes you don't know. If you don't ask, you don't know.
I love it. Yeah, I love it. I'm a huge advocate for speaking to existing clients, and many agencies, they don't do that. They're not very good at that. They don't know how to have their mechanisms in place to do it, or they've just neglected to do it because they're too focused on the outbound stuff. But your existing clients can be a huge source of knowledge for both pains and challenges within their sectors. So it can help inform what your outbound, prospect strategy should be, and the stuff you're talking about. That should be really important. But also a lot of clients, and I've ran a few client insight surveys in my time. And, those you might know, Remini at Brilliant to Human, she's brilliant at doing this, is running dedicated client insight surveys, and having a third party to do that can be really powerful. And the stuff it can uncover.
Sorry, Dan, I have to stop you there because somehow I don't know if it's connected to my earphones or something. Yeah, something else is or someone next door. Hang on.
That's all right.
We'll do a clap
That's
after
fine.
this point. Yeah, I've got like music playing in my earphones. How do I stop?
That's all right. It happens with my son's
beep, and then right. I think I'm with you. I apologise. Half of that last question I
That's
didn't
all right.
hear, so I thought I'd stop you because I wouldn't know how to sort of.
Yeah, no, that's fine. No, just put your hand up. It's fine, absolutely fine. Do you want to start the question again?
Yeah. So I guess it was less of a question at that point, wasn't it? We were just talking.
I'll tell you what. Let's do an edit here, and you can probably cut back from when you started talking about it. Then you can probably just edit me in if you just leave a pause, because I think I know what I was starting off saying.
All right, yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. Let's do it.
So just leave a pause. So I love client insight surveys. I think they're so important. I've been involved in a few in my time. Remini at Brilliant to Human is a really good person to use for those. She's someone external to asking those questions, because agencies, I think, are pretty bad at speaking to their existing clients to understand and get insight into what they could be talking about from an outbound perspective, such as they're the people who you're closest to. You probably have really good relationships with them. They probably your target audience. They're in your sectors and industry that you want to target already. So using them for insight to inform wider content is going to be really important. So finding and having mechanisms in place to be able to talk to them and get that insight out of them is going to be really important. But equally, talking to them as well and running insight surveys can actually help uncover blind spots within your own service offering. So whenever I've seen these done, and agencies have spoke to their existing clients, or they've got someone to do it on their behalf. Normally, one of the questions is, agency X, you're working with them in this area. Did you know they also did this? The answer is usually no. Oh, I didn't realize they did that. Would that be something that would be useful to you? Yeah, it really bloody would. So actually it starts to then uncover blind spots within existing client bases for where you can then cross-sell your adjacent services you have. You then start to unlock incremental revenue, which who doesn't want incremental revenue from existing clients, right?
Exactly. I mean, it ticks so many boxes, as you've said, and it's just something that, we advise everyone to do, whether you're getting outside support or doing it internally. As you said, it can affect your service offering, products if you sell products, build a better relationship with that client, upsell, cross-sell, and also learn so much about not just your current customers, but the type of people that they are, the type of pain points they have, the things that so that you can build a content strategy that actually works better than one based on your assumptions. And I think too much marketing really is just assumption led. I've got an idea about a campaign that's going to work and let's throw loads of money into it, rather than, an outside in approach, as I like to call it. Let's gather insights. What's keeping our prospects, our customers up at night? And then how can we serve them the value that they need right now and turn that into a campaign? I think that you also touched on, we kind of talked about the problem with just focusing on the initial source. And I think that kind of sort of leads into the area of the problem with attribution modeling. And I think a lot of companies, B2B brands, especially like in the SaaS world, for example, they sort of focus a little bit too much on that, like first touch. The reality being, as you've sort of exposed today, that in the B2B world, especially, in order to win business and convert, there are more touch points inevitably. So focusing just on first touch point and traffic source might lead you into kind of putting your money and resources into the wrong areas. And I often talk about, like the dark funnel, for example, the fact that, someone might be listening to this podcast, right? And then they might, at some point, then they might see one of my LinkedIn posts or one of yours, then they might tell their colleague about us. And then that colleague goes and Googles Cactus or the creative copywriter. They end up on our website. They become a lead and we convert them. And if we were just to focus too much on that digital touch point, the data that we kind of have online, we would attribute that to SEO because they
Yeah.
might search in Google. The reality is there are all these things happening online and offline, including just word of mouth. And I guess that's why it's so important to focus less on this traditional funnel of they do this, then they do that, then they do that.
Absolutely.
And the reality of the complexity of the customer journey.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And attribution is really hard in B2B because it's normally made up of multiple places. It's not maybe say in B2C when attribution might be, a little bit more linear and you can say exactly where a new customer was acquired from. Oh, well, they came in through this entry point with a discount code and, they got their first month free and then there was upsell after that, and then they are then into the ecosystem of the whatever brand or product. But in B2B, it's a little bit more complicated than that, which is why I mention focus less around sources because the source can actually be quite varied, but focus more on the touch points along the way, which aided conversion. And that point you make around traditional sales funnels, they're actually quite expensive things for agencies. If you try and run a traditional linear model as a sales funnel for an agency, it's quite an expensive thing to do. You're assuming people enter here, they work through the funnel here and they get to here. If they don't, they go back to start again, do not pass go, do not collect 200.
Yeah. So
it's actually quite an expensive and inefficient thing. It has its strengths. And I think in modern marketing, especially in B2B context, it demands a model that addresses more longer sales cycles, something which involves multiple decision makers and the importance of ongoing relationships, which is why I'm quite an advocate for not necessarily having a linear funnel, but moving more to maybe say a flywheel model that reflects how B2B businesses rely on ongoing relationships and customer advocacy. So you're emphasizing perhaps retention, you're emphasizing upselling and referrals as happy customers grow through word of mouth. So, that might look like, for example, in 3 key stages, it might be you're looking to attract, so you bring in the right audience with your valuable content or, whatever solutions you've got. That's your kind of early stage marketing. You're building that trust and chemistry through meaningful interactions. This is your touch point. This is your engagement part of the flywheel. And then as you win customers and as they're happy, you've got the delight phase where it supports customers maybe, post purchase that you then turn them into advocates who then go away and then help you to attract new. And you've kind of got this flywheel approach. So I think if agencies can think less about a sales funnel as being a traditional linear model and start thinking it as like a flywheel, that's going to be more effective for you and allows you to build a more comprehensive strategy around it.
Absolutely. And I've also got beef with I know this is called Funnel Visionaries, but I also have beef with the traditional funnel model. I mean, in the end of the day, it's an analogy, it's a metaphor, right? And there's always going to be problems with trying to, there's merit to simplifying things into like a nice little diagram because it helps us to kind of focus, but it doesn't factor in the nuances and the complexity of, like I said, the reality of the customer journey. And I think the problem with the traditional funnel, as you said there, one of the problems is that the thought behind it is that you have like MQLs got traffic, MQLs, SQLs, and we're just trying to squeeze sales out the end and that's it. But the reality is, even before the kind of post-sale part, which you mentioned, we can still use everyone that we should still aim to nurture people and build long-term relationships and not just try to squeeze sales out of everyone that comes into the funnel. And at some point I came up with the idea of it's not a funnel, it's more like a chocolate fountain, right? It's going round. And I guess it's, again, not the perfect analogy either, but it's similar to the flywheel approach.
I like that. The chocolate fountain agency funnel.
Yeah,
that's a great blog post. The agency funnel is a chocolate fountain.
Exactly. There you go. I think we've written one before, but I think it needs some revitalizing because you're getting some chocolate, you're getting some revenue, some customers, but at the same time you're nurturing and you're keeping them in that cycle.
It's true that it's not everyone who enters your sales funnel is a prospect. I mean, I've certainly worked in agencies where probably 20-30% of our early stage funnel weren't people who were going to buy from us, but there were people I wanted to bring into our funnel, wanted to get close to, wanted to build a relationship with, because they've got great networks. They're connected to other people who probably could work with us, and they can then become advocates with us if they've experienced our agency, our marketing, our services. So I bring them in intentionally to be advocates. And it's using that flywheel model where I bring them in, I'd attract them in, we'd engage with them. They probably don't become customers, but they really like what we do. So they advocate on our behalf. And then actually wider people they're connected to come into us and discover us because of that. So not everyone in your audience or your prospects have to be potential customers. You do have some, tactical selection with who you're close to.
Yeah, as you said, referrers and content consumers. And there's just value in that still, because someone who's consuming your content because it's valuable to them, like you said, they might never become an SQL or be the right fit for what you're offering. But if they're still getting value from your content and you're encouraging them to share that content, then they may be the ones that bring, more people into the top of the funnel, including those that are, the right fit, the right kind of fit for your whatever you're offering. So that's the chocolate fountain idea. And you also mentioned, obviously, with the flywheel, such a key part of that, which is missed from the traditional funnel, is post-sale. We like to call that AFFU, just because we coin terms like you do, which I love coining a term. So, TOFU, MOFU, BOFU, and AFFU, after funnel, which I think so many marketers across the board, be in all industries, they sort of forget about that because they're so focused on leads rather than revenue and getting more leads in. They forget that, in terms of driving revenue, your current customer base is such a brilliant source of doing so, maximizing customer lifetime value.
And it's an absolute source of market. It's a marketing goldmine for any happy customers over the last couple of years. They're advocates. Go back to them, get a testimonial, ask them if they'll endorse on your behalf.
Yeah.
Ask if you can use them within a case study, even if it's not a case study that's able to demonstrate, a direct ROI yet or an outcome. Get them to talk about the experience of working with you, because a lot of agencies, you'll deliver a project for a client, which it might be 12, 18 months before they start seeing a return from it, by which point you're no longer involved, but you've set something up, you created it, but it needs time to kind of the commercial model to work. So they might not be able to give you a case study which says, yes, we delivered X new revenue or growth around this. They can't say that yet. But what they can say is, it's really good working with agency X. They really understood us. The process was brilliant. Nothing was too much of a problem, yada, yada, yada. And give you a really powerful testimonial which endorses you as a fantastic agency or business to work with. So you've got all of these people who are happy customers out the other end. So use them. Try not to focus too much on the top of funnel, but the people who have come out the back of it, who've experienced you, they're huge advocates.
We've just implemented a win-back strategy whereby we created a survey to send out to clients that stopped working with us, either because the project wrapped up or for other reasons. And part of what we're doing within that survey is asking them what happened, what was the main reason, and again, you mentioned this before, trying to understand if it's because they needed an agency that offered more. And in fact, because we're growing our service offering, now we can do that. So we're, and we giving them a little incentive to give feedback. And even just the testimonials we're drawing from this survey are brilliant. It's brilliant content. It's brilliant things to kind of put out there to build that confidence in companies and people like them that we are the right fit and we do a great job. I want to loop back to metrics and results, because we talked about the difficulty, right? Mm-hmm. We talked about the fact that it's not just a simple funnel, and we can't just look at the simple traffic sources and use that to kind of understand what's working and what's not. So with this idea of touch point marketing and the reality of the complexity of it all, how would you go about looking at results, and what metrics would you analyze, and how would you sort of learn what's working and what's not, so that it can then inform your decisions about what to do next?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So certainly from the top level, what you're looking at, you've got to be looking at, number of conversions, pipeline, all the leading metrics that says my marketing's working. Are we getting leads in? Are we getting early stage conversations in? What's the deal value coming in? Because that's the lifeblood. And that's really what our marketing is trying to do. Aside from brand awareness and kind of all this other stuff, it come down to brass tacks. It's about new business for the agency. So, you definitely want to be tracking those and having a handle on those. And any marketeer who's listening to this, any B2B marketeer, if you're not that commercially involved in the pipeline discussions, get involved. Get involved in a commercial meeting. If there isn't a commercial meeting, get one set up to review the pipeline, look at what deals are in the early stage, look at what's converting, have a handle on what your conversion rate is, not just your win or loss conversion rate, but also look at your conversion from early stage conversations to stuff that actually turns into. So your MQL to SQL, marketing qualified leads to sales qualified lead conversion. Make sure you've got a handle on that, because that's a big thing marketing can optimize, is not just can we find the right target audience to talk to, but can we convert them to actual opportunities? Can we uncover the pains and challenges to then position ourselves as people who can help with a solution? So that's one thing to look at. The second thing I think I look at is what I touched on before, which is around being able to track and having the systems in place and the process in place to track the touch points that prospects are having and knowing what are the most successful touch points. So what touch points are involved in deals which go through from MQL to SQL, stuff that goes from SQL through to proposal. Hopefully one, even if it's lost, there was still opportunity there. So obviously you've done something right to get it to that point. So what were those touch points along the way? What were the successful things you did along that prospect journey? And keep a track of them. Obviously understanding where people came from is going to be informed by that, because touch points, as we said, it's not always as straightforward to understand the source of where someone came from. They will come from probably lots of different places, and that's where it becomes a little bit convoluted. Touch points are sources, because you might have been referred to someone originally, but you got to build a relationship with them. You might have met them at an event where you start to have a bit of relationship building with them. You've then sent them a case study for something you've just done for a client in their sector. So it kind of demonstrates that sector awareness. You kind of say, well, what was the source of that lead? Well, we referred to it originally, but we still had to be present in front of them and get them to kind of like us and have good chemistry. Then we still had to demonstrate our ability through a case study. So actually you've got 3 touch points there which make up the source of that client. So being able to track what they are and which ones are involved in the most successful progressions through your funnel, I think are some of the leading indicators. Like, you're going to have metrics along the way which track that. Okay, you're going to have well, how many conversations are we having? Because we know we need to have X amount to convert Y to then turn Z into this number of deals. So you need to be tracking things like, well, how many conversations are we having? You need to be looking at things like, how many events are we going to? If we're building a strategy around having physical interactions with people, what sort of number of events do we need to? Is it 1, 2 a month? Is it 5, 6 a month? Obviously, the more you can go to, it is a numbers game. The more you go to, the more people you'll meet, and the more opportunities to meet people you're likely to have. You still want to be measuring things like your LinkedIn impressions are you getting? Yes, it can feel a little bit like a vanity metric, but actually, if you're in a business where you know there's a direct relation between the number of LinkedIn impressions you get, your visibility on LinkedIn as a platform, and how many leads then you get in, it stands to reason we'd want to track that, because if we can increase it by 20%, we're going to get X number of more leads coming in. So we'll have a focus on what content we're posting. We'll have a look at how personal we're coming, what type of posts we're doing. We'll probably put in place a framework which helps us to know what type of content to put on there, to make sure we're varying it, to make sure we're coming across with the best representation of ourselves, to get those impressions up, to drive more leads. So yeah, there's a few things there you could be tracking, and they're all really important. None are more important than the other, but when they sit next to each other, they help inform decisions which will make your marketing better.
It's funny, we talked about there being no silver bullet in marketing channels. There's also no silver bullet in terms of analysing data. There's no one size fits all right or wrong way to go. These metrics are wrong, don't look at them, look at these, and those should inform your decisions. The reality is it depends on the agency, what you're doing, what's important to you, and you just have to be smart. And I'd say also don't get bogged down in, analysis paralysis. I think sometimes I've been guilty of that in the past, where we have an academy, which is a digital product, right? And I was focused too much on the data and the numbers, and not the fact that data is only as good as the decisions you make off the back of it, right? Data by itself doesn't do anything, right? So I think some nice advice there in terms of the sorts of things you should be looking at. And I really love, again, the idea of looking at your client base. Who have you won, and what was their customer journey, and what touch points worked? Because that's really having that almost like flywheel in a way. I mean, it's not really a flywheel, but it's just looking at within and looking at your actual customers and what actually worked.
Yeah, you can sometimes be. So a question I get a lot is, where should I be looking for data? What sources? What can I go and read? What research can I go and look at? And often, one of my basic answers to that is start with your own client base. Look inside the clients you've got. Look at the data that you have on them. Conduct a bit of an interview with them. Go and spend 20 minutes talking to them if you don't speak to them regularly, just to ask them a few questions, understand a few things. They will help you. They're your clients. They like you. They're working with you for a reason. So use that relationship to then understand things a little bit more. That's sometimes some of the most powerful places you can get Yes, you can then go out and you can look for some research, you can read articles, you can talk to others outside the industry. But all of that mashed together is going to give you a really important view or perspective on what the future might be, what your opinion or perspective might be, what's keeping people up at night. And it's not about any one source of data telling you that. It's about going to 2 or 3 different places, bringing it all together, analyzing it and go, okay, what do I take from this that I can use and can inform what I'm doing? And there's tools available to do that. A year, 2 years ago, you would have sit down, wouldn't you? You'd have to do that manually. You have a spreadsheet of answers. You'd be doing it yourself. Now you've got, I know you don't want to use the AI buzzword, but you have got platforms now you can plug that into that will extrapolate insights for you. You know, I used it for the agency growth survey, plugged all the anonymous data in, removed all the personal identifiable information. And Tom Head and I used it to refine down and extrapolate the insights. It sped up that data analysis 10 times what it would have otherwise been. And it was arguably more accurate as well. Then we could then focus on, well, what would our advice be based on this, what this data is saying us? We could focus more on the intent and advice rather than spending our time on the analysis.
Yeah, absolutely. And you dropped in the AI buzzword there at the end. Dropped it in. Unfortunately, we don't have time to talk about AI. That's a whole other episode.
It's a whole other episode. But
we'll have to have you back.
But there's huge efficiencies agencies can use, and not just thinking about, well, how can I use AI to sell to clients, or what service can I create around AI? Biggest opportunity for agencies is to use it to drive efficiencies, to get your margin up, to do tasks quicker, more efficient. And if you do that more efficient, you've got margin. If you've got margin, you've got profitability, and profitability over turnover every day of the week, because then you can reinvest, you can put that into other things like your marketing, etc. So yeah, really important for agencies to understand what AI platforms and tools they can be using to make themselves more efficient, to get stuff done better and quicker.
Yeah, and it's sophisticated automation, isn't it? So like
it
automate
is.
the parts that it doesn't make sense for the human brain to kind of do, and then use your brain for the more creative endeavors. And and by automating and becoming more efficient, arguably, then you have more time to kind of work on more touch points, but making sure they're all quality. So we can hit quantity and quality with, I guess, the power of AI helping us to do so. Yeah. Dan, thank you so much. Very, very valuable advice and wisdom there.
You're very welcome.
Sharing it all.
No, I enjoyed it a lot. Thank you very much for having me on. Really appreciated it.
Enjoy the rest of your Friday. We'll have to have you back on and we'll just talk about AI. It was quite refreshing not to delve into AI because it always rears its head in these discussions.
It does. It's got to get a mention, hasn't it? Because it is such an important thing. Yeah. AI adoption strategies for agencies is another podcast entirely. But but hopefully there's stuff in there
for the future.
As a teaser, yeah. Look forward to that one.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Dan. And
you're very welcome.
Have a good day, mate.
Speak to you soon. Take care.